Remember, everyone should just be watching the screen and paying attention. You will have time to play with this on your own later. Don't get distracted. All right. I've had people in here and they just get lost in their own world and they're forgetting that I'm even up here explaining it. And then they wind up asking me a question from something that I just answered. So please watch what I'm doing. All right. Quick review. Remember, Magic Wand is for selecting flat areas of color or areas that are enclosed in a border, like on the template. All right, this is why if you go to your background layer and you click with the Magic Wand tool, it will automatically just select the whole side of the box. And if you hold down Shift, you can select multiple sides. If there was a break in the border here, or there was some other thing going on, like other colors other than one flat color in here, it wouldn't be selecting everything and it wouldn't be as easy. The other thing that I should remind you of is that remember, you're always making sure that you have a duplicate of your background copy. So when you open up that template file, you've got background. The first thing you should do when you open that up is go up here to your little layer menu, click on it, go to duplicate layer, and that will give you a copy of the background. Then you can just turn off the background and forget about it. And just it's there in case you mess up and you need to go back and start from scratch. It's just sort of a backup. It's kind of a you covering yourself in case you screw up. Now, you can make your selections for your box faces from this background copy. However, when it comes time to actually apply your fills or strokes or whatever you're doing, please create a new layer. Do not put those on the same background layer. All right? Do it like this and put it on a new layer that's separate. The reason being is that if you clutter up your background copy with too much stuff, then you won't be able to use it for selecting anymore. And that's primarily what it's there for. All right, so if you get rid of it and you forget, which we all forget, if you forget and put a bunch of stuff on there and you can't get rid of it, then that's when you can delete your background copy, go back to the background, the original background, make another duplicate of it, and keep on going. Does that make sense? That's not very encouraging. Okay. Hopefully you'll get it. All right, so that's the main difference there. Now, the other version, Quick Select, that's when you are trying to isolate something that isn't flat. All right, so remember, we did this yesterday, correct? Where we, let me go to Windows. Remember this? We had our Batman guy, and I showed you there's a couple different ways to bring him to the template. You can either just get the Move tool and just drag him over, and then select the white and delete it. Computer's running extremely slow. There he is. And see right now, let me change the background on it. See, he's got a white background. So to get rid of it, let me zoom in. Get the magic wand. Hold down Shift as I click. Click once. Again, again, again. Zoom in a little closer. One more time up top. Then just hit the delete key. Boom. Or you could have selected the white in the original image, gone up to select, and then do inverse, and that flips it from background to foreground. And then I could have just said Control C, go here, Control V. And there he is without the white. So either way. But now let's say we want to bring over an image that doesn't have a flat background, like this. All right, let's say I want to separate Robin here from the rest of the background and just have him. Please turn that music off. Thank you. All right. Now I'm going to switch. See, if I use the magic wand here, it's too spotty. So switch, click and hold to quick selection. And again, this is going to grow the selection based on where the cursor is. And if I just keep dragging slowly, it will eventually encapsulate what I want. I can make the brush size a little smaller or bigger with the bracket keys, which are next to the P key. I can go bigger, smaller as needed. Once you get most of this selected, you're going to need to go back and tweak it a little bit. Now, notice in the middle of the cursor there's that little plus sign. That's because this tool is stuck in additive mode by default. It's always going to, every time you click, it's going to add to the selection you've already made. If you want to take away from the selection, hold down Alt and see the plus turns to a minus. And now you can go in and kind of go back and forth between adding and subtracting from the selection. All right, once you have most of this selected, you could copy and paste it as is, but what I'm going to do is clean up the selection first. Go up to Select. In my computer, it's called Refine Edge, but I'm using a slightly older version of Photoshop than you guys are because my computer's a little older. So on your computers, it's going to be Select, and then it'll be something like Select and Mask or something, I think it's called. If you guys see that or not. Okay. Now watch what it does. You see how it's sort of showing me what he looks like without the background? Okay. Now look here at these edges. They look okay, but they're still kind of chunky. I mean, this is kind of a low-res image anyway, but we can do better than this. So go to Smooth, click and drag this up, and you see how the edge gets a little crisper? Take the contrast up a little bit, and then take Shift Edge up a couple pixels, right? Now that's a lot better. Now I can simply, and if there's other parts that are missed, like there's this little swoop of hair up here that I want to get back, you can actually switch between selection tools. So I'm going to go to my polygonal lasso while this is still selected, hold down the Alt key to take away from the selection, and I'm going to bring back that little chunk. Kind of looks like Elvis hair. All right. Now, and there's other little parts. If I want to go in and clean up this little part here that didn't get the corner, I can go back, hold on Alt again with the lasso. You kind of have to go back to where you started from there. And, just do a little cleanup here and there. Then once you're happy with it, just Control C to copy. Go back to the box, Control V to paste. And There he is. All right. So that's the difference between Quick Select and Magic Wand. And there's other little parts down here that, again, I could go back with other tools and fix, like this little bit of white down here. Delete. All right. So moving on, the crop tool, fifth one down. Some people get confused and think that this is like the marquee tool because it looks similar when you're using it, but it's different. All right, if you get this and you click and drag, it's going to make a selection just like the marquee tool, except that when you let go, what it's really doing is it's preparing to crop the image. All right, and you can adjust it and move it even after you've made the initial selection. But if I were to hit enter now my image is resized to this, and that's not what I want. So if you get confused and accidentally use this tool, don't freak out and start doing lots of clicks because you're going to use up all your undos. Just Control Z, and it'll come back. All right. The eyedropper tool. You can't really see, but down in the bottom left corner of your screen, that's where your foreground and background colors are displayed. These two little squared colored squares, right? If you double click on those squares, you'll get your color picker, and you can see, remember this from yesterday, you can select whatever color you want, slide this around, okay? But let's say there's a specific color that you can't find in your swatches or your color picker, and you want to match it up to something else you did in your image. Simply get the color picker and click and hold it, and watch what happens to my foreground color when I click and hold. You see how the color's changing on that wheel? The bottom of the circle is what my color currently is, and the top is changing to what it will be if I select the color, right? So this is handy because, you can go in and pick a specific color that you maybe see in a photograph or something and you don't know how to get it in Photoshop. Just bring in the picture and use the eyedropper, and it won't be a problem. All right, the next one down is the healing brush, and all these things bundled together. You don't need to worry about this. We'll just ignore that. You can get by without it. The brush and pencil tool are very similar. They are controlled by the options up here. You can change the style of the brush from either something kind of splotchy to something more round. You can change the roundness of the brush. You can change the size, but you can also change the size with the bracket keys, as I've already shown you. All right, and when you are doing the brush, let me switch to a brighter color so you can see the difference. Oh, let me up the opacity. See the soft edge that it's giving? It's almost like an airbrush, okay? The pencil tool, same thing, except a harsher edge, okay? Now, the nice thing about the brush tool is, again, you can take the opacity down like I had it before and do some kind of subtle things with it, subtle effects. Whoops. All right. And you can make your own brushes and do other stuff, but we won't really worry about that. I did that this morning, but you don't think you really need to worry about it. Okay, clone stamp. This is a fun one. This is one you're probably going to use a lot of. The clone stamp will sample certain parts of an image and then clone them to other parts. So let's say we have this Robin image, and I'm going to switch his symbol from one side to the other on his costume. If you look at the cursor, you'll see that it looks normal. But if I hold down the Alt key, it changes to like a little target, little crosshair. If I click on it and let go, now you'll see that it's displaying the area I clicked on inside of it. Once I start left clicking and painting on there, it's actually sampling from that area. If I click on the red and start painting, it's just sampling that flat red color. So pretty soon, all right, if I want to add more lines in the background and the ceiling there, I click on this part, holding down the Alt key, and then just start painting. And you see the little plus sign that's running alongside of it? That's showing me the area that it's sampling from at any given moment. So it takes a little while to get the hang of this. You'll have to like get used to like clicking and resampling several times. But it's pretty useful. All right, if I really wanted to, I could. Yes. You're going to miss stuff, but okay. Well, then go ahead. All right. Give Robin 2 heads or something. All right, so that's the clone stamp. This is useful, like let's say you're doing something like a Tarzan box and you're doing a jungle scene and you have like a little flower and you want to add more flowers to the scene without having to cut and paste them. You can just clone one of the flowers in the scene and just paint it over and over again multiple times, or bubbles in the water or blades of grass, stuff like that. Okay, so that's the clone stamp tool in a nutshell. The next tool down is the history brush. We can ignore that for now. Eraser tool does pretty much what it says. You can either change it from brush to pencil mode or block mode. Make sure your opacity is at 100, and you can see that it just will erase whatever's on the layer pretty easily. The nice thing about it, though, is that if you switch it to brush mode, like this, and take the opacity down really low, you can do some nice kind of fade out things, like down here by his feet. I'm just going to kind of click multiple times with the low opacity. I think it's down to like about 15%. Probably use a slightly smaller brush size, but you see how I'm just going in and very lightly fading that bottom edge out so you can't see where his legs are cut off. So that's the eraser tool. Next is the gradient tool. The gradient does a fill, but it does it with a blend of 2 or more colors. So let's go back down to our background copy and let's select one of our sides of our box. Get the magic wand, click on that. Now with the gradient tool, let's select, I don't know, red and yellow. Now remember, we don't want to put this on the background copy. We want to put it on a new layer. So create a new layer. Now this will fill in the gradient depending on which direction you drag it. So it's a click and drag kind of a thing. If I click and go from up to down, it will do it from foreground to background. If I drag it down to up, opposite. If I do it diagonally, it will blend it diagonally. Okay, so that might be one way to potentially fill in your backgrounds of your boxes if you don't want to just use a flat color. All right, there are several different types of gradients you can do. As you can see here, the two that you'll probably use the most are foreground to background and foreground to transparent. And you can switch them just by clicking on them. You can also do round blends, like you can do a round gradient. There's that one, and if I click and drag that, it does that kind of a thing. So you want to drag it pretty wide if you want it to cover a big area. All right. So that's that. I don't want to get too far ahead of everyone else. Let's do a couple more things here on the toolbar. Blur, sharpen, and smudge. Okay. The blur tool, pretty self-explanatory. You click on it, and if you keep, coloring in that area, you see how blurry his face is getting? That's before and after. So that might make a neat effect. The sharpen tool does the opposite. Instead of blurring it, it makes it really sharp, really crisp. Here I'm kind of overdoing it. It's actually sharpening these pixels to the point where they're oversaturated. And then finally the smudge tool, which is sort of like smudging wet paint, I guess. And if you have the strength all the way up, it does some weird stuff. But you can see here how it's just kind of blurring stuff around. Again, I don't know what you would really use this for, but it's kind of a neat effect. All right, so that is blur, sharpen, and smudge. Dodge and burn. Dodge makes an area lighter. If I keep clicking in this area, it's making it overexposed, super bright. You undo that. Burn, of course, is the opposite. Burn makes an area darker. So if you have an area that's really bright and overexposed, use the burn tool, and that will make it darker. Then finally, the sponge tool affects the saturation of or the intensity of a color. So if you have a color that's not very bright and you want to make it a little more intense, use the sponge tool and keep clicking it, and it will get more saturated. takes a little while. Oh, it's set to desaturate mode, that's why. You can saturate or desaturate. There you go. There's saturate mode. You can see how that's working. Okay. Any questions about any of this stuff? To those of you that are awake, anyway. Okay. Yes. How to create a layer? Yeah, absolutely. All right. So to create a new layer, go down here to this button, lower right-hand corner. It's right next to the trash can. If you hover over it, it'll say create a new layer. Just click on that, and it's automatic. Okay. Also, you can go up here to this menu in the layers thing and say new layer, or do Shift Control N. Either of those three ways will create a new layer. Now, sometimes Photoshop will automatically put something on a new layer, like if you're copying and pasting something or dragging something into an image, Photoshop will automatically put that on a new layer for you. Yes. All right. Any other questions or? Yes. Okay, if you want to get rid of your grid, go up to View, go to Show, and then check Grid right there. Okay? Yep. And that goes for anything else, rulers or guides or whatever. But sometimes you might want to have your grid up, because remember what we talked about on Monday, using a grid as a starting point is actually kind of handy for coming up with a design. But you'd want to figure that out in your sketch phase first. I got two. Yeah, go ahead. Doesn't show up on what? Okay. So if something on your screen disappears, like your toolbar or your menus, go up to View, go to Screen Mode, and make sure you go to Standard Screen Mode. If that does not work, then you go to Window, and you go to Workspace, and you make sure that Essentials Default is selected. If not, go to Reset Essentials, a few things down, and that should bring it back. All right. Anything else? Yes. Well, the eyedropper just selects colors. It doesn't actually fill in colors. If you want to fill in a color, you need to go to Edit Fill. All right. Just make sure that you've got your selection there, and make sure that you're on a different layer, on a new layer. Then you can go up to Edit Fill. Yes. It doesn't what? It doesn't work. Well, make sure that you've got, if you go up here, make sure, check your exposure and check your range as well. It might be set to shadows, midtones, or highlights. All right, so if you're doing burn and you're like in a dark area already, it's not going to really show up. Does that make sense? Yeah. So check your range. All right, so for the next 10 minutes or so, you guys can just play around and try to do some of the things that we've gone over so far. Come up with any other questions. I'm going to pause this now. I could do a little bit more, but I'm just going to stop here and because we've finished a little early today.